This should not exist. According to every accepted timeline of human history, this place, this impossible arrangement of stone, was an absolute impossibility. Before the first farmer, before the potter's wheel, before the very idea of a king. This was built by a people who, officially, had no reason to build it. They were still nomadic hunters, living hand-to-mouth in a rugged, changing world. Yet, they erected something that demanded a level of organization we attribute to full-blown civilization. The official narrative is simple. First, agriculture, then permanent settlement, and finally, architecture. But Göbekli Tepe violently shatters that clean progression. This is the oldest known monumental structure in the world. And it was built 12,000 years ago. 8,000 years before Sumer. 5 millennia before the pyramids. To grasp the scale of the anomaly, we must reset our understanding of the Stone Age mind. This was the pre-pottery Neolithic period, deep in the Younger Dryas. The ice caps were retreating, the climate stabilizing, but life was relentlessly uncertain. The only social structure was the temporary hunter-gatherer band. There was no centralized authority, no social hierarchy beyond the tribe. No cities, no metal tools, and crucially no widespread surplus of food. How do you convince hundreds of independent, highly mobile hunter-gatherers to cease the daily hunt, to stop surviving, and instead spend years carving and moving 20-ton limestone pillars? This isn't building a hut, this is engineering. It implies surveying, sustained manpower, and an understanding of geometry and load-bearing. The coordination required is astronomical. It implies a shared vision, a binding doctrine powerful enough to supersede the immediate need for survival. This is a permanent answer to a question that history said hadn't been asked yet. How do we worship? We are witnessing the first great leap of human civilization, not sparked by necessity or engineering, but by pure, abstract belief. Göbekli Tepe is a frozen moment of human consciousness, built when we were still learning how to be human. The structures are not houses. They are sacred rooms. The central T-pillars, up to 18 feet tall, are stylized, abstracted representations of human bodies, deities or ancestors. Look closer. On the belts are carved symbols, H's and crescent moons, perhaps representing constellations or a cryptic, prehistoric writing system. The enclosures were meticulously built, used for a period lasting maybe 1,000 years and then deliberately, ritually buried under tons of dirt and rubble. The carvings are not decorations. They are a prehistoric menagerie of the dangerous and powerful. Scorpions, snakes, foxes, vultures, and fierce aurochs. Notably, we see no carvings of domesticated animals. Only the wild, untamed creatures of the Paleolithic hunter's world. This is a temple to the hunt, not after the harvest. The pillars stand facing inwards, forming a silent circle. A massive, public, communal space for a ceremony we can only guess at, perhaps related to death or the stars. The floor of the earliest enclosure, Enclosure D, is terrazzo, a carefully polished lime plaster floor, demonstrating a skill level far beyond their supposed technology. The complexity of the planning is staggering. Each layer of construction is geometrically precise, suggesting a deep understanding of layout and measurement. But the most inexplicable fact is this. The builders who meticulously carved and placed these stones were incapable of building basic, durable shelters for themselves. It's a paradox. The greatest efforts of their lives were spent not on survival but on worship. This is the architecture of an obsession. This colossal undertaking required organization, specialization of labor, and shared doctrine, the three defining qualities of civilization, yet it predates civilization itself. The construction sequence itself is baffling. The earliest and largest enclosures are the most technically sophisticated. The later ones are smaller, cruder, and less precise. This suggests a devolution of engineering skill, a loss of original knowledge, or a decline in the pool of organized labor. Why did the builders forget how to build better? Perhaps the very act of settling down, of becoming farmers, diluted the specialized workforce. The limestone quarry is nearby, but moving these 20-ton monoliths without the wheel or draft animals is still a feat we struggle to comprehend. The questions hang in the air like dust from the millennia. Who were the individuals with the authority to initiate and sustain this task for 1,000 years? We see no evidence of warfare or conquest here. This cooperation was voluntary. So, what was the unifying belief? What was the shared reward? Could the builders have been driven by a catastrophic memory? Perhaps the Younger Dryas impact event, a sudden climate shift, inspired this massive religious plea. Did they believe the structures themselves, the Great Pillar Men, held the power to stabilize the world or to guarantee the return of the wild herds? Was this site a neutral gathering ground, a sacred fair, where rival tribes could meet, trade information, and engage in shared ritual without conflict? The scale of the work meant hundreds of mouths to feed daily. Did this sustained logistical pressure accidentally force the invention of agriculture? If so, then the world's first temple didn't just predate farming. It might have been the reason farming began. The divine desire creating the human necessity. How did they communicate the construction plan across hundreds of miles and numerous linguistic groups? This suggests a universal language of symbols. Was the shared ritual experience so profound that it literally changed the structure of the human brain, allowing them to imagine a future beyond the next hunt? Could this be the first university? The first great experiment in mass coordination, all built on the intangible glue of faith. What if the purpose of the burials was not decommissioning but renewal? A ritual requirement to bury the old temple to consecrate the ground for the next one. Was there a specific astronomical alignment that dictated the layout? Some researchers connect the pillars to the belt of Orion or the motion of Sirius. The constant presence of the vulture, a symbol of sky burial, suggests a deep preoccupation with death and transition, a way of sending the dead back to the celestial realm. This wasn't built for a year, it was built for the long memory of the tribe. A legacy etched in stone for all future generations of hunters to witness. Academic archaeology struggles with Göbekli Tepe because it breaks the old model. The leading theory is one of social engineering through ritual. Experts suggest that the monument served as a pilgrimage center for numerous dispersed groups. The very act of building it fostered a new unifying identity. This convergence required a stable political truce, enforced not by armies, but by the power of the central myth and the charismatic authority of the priests or shamans. The consensus is, religion came first. The spiritual drive to build the monument preceded the technological or societal ability to build it. The shift from gathering wild grains to actively managing them is thought to have happened in this immediate region, the Karachadag Mountains. The high energy requirement of the temple acted as an evolutionary pressure on the local population to secure their food supply quickly and efficiently. The presence of massive communal food consumption, like brewing beer from wild wheat, strongly suggests feasting and ritual gatherings that went beyond mere survival. This evidence aligns with the idea that the long-term, sustained labor necessary for the site was the catalyst for the eventual domestication of wild wheat, not the other way around. In essence, the temple did not grow out of a village. The village, or perhaps the idea of the village, grew out of the temple. This fundamentally changes our view of the Neolithic Revolution. It wasn't about efficiency, it was about ideology. We must accept the interpretation. It was the priesthood, the religious elite, who commanded the world's first labor force, not the warlord or the merchant. This makes Göbekli Tepe a monument to the power of shared delusion, a unifying myth that overcame the most basic human instincts for self-preservation. But even this theory doesn't fully explain the abrupt, deliberate burial. Why dismantle a spiritual center that literally created your civilization? The structures weren't destroyed, they were respectfully interred, perhaps as a way of decommissioning a sacred engine once its purpose was fulfilled. This is the greatest paradox of Göbekli Tepe. The ceremony existed before the civilization that should have hosted it. Imagine a hunter-gatherer society on the cusp of the Neolithic Age, somehow achieved the world's first feat of mass organization not for food, but for faith. Neem Tin Tao Raxa Hoi. Belief did not evolve as a byproduct of settled life, it was the original force that created settled life. The central message is profound. Civilization is not a mechanical equation of food and surplus. It is a spark of abstract thought, a shared vision. Göbekli Tepe proves that the spirit of humanity, the need for meaning, ritual, and shared narrative, is older and more fundamental than our need for survival. This was a society where the symbolic world was the real world, where a few abstract ideas held more weight than all the food in the field. They did not gather to eat, they gathered to believe. And in doing so, they unknowingly invented the infrastructure that would eventually feed the world. The order of human progress must be reversed, from hunter temple builder to farmer. The spirit leading the hand. The hunter's dedication to the spiritual world led to the farmer's world of material surplus. The most spiritual act created the most material consequence. The blueprint established here, centralized ritual, specialized labor and binding shared belief, did not disappear when the site was buried. The social technology invented at Göbekli Tepe migrated, evolving into the temples and city-states of the Fertile Crescent that came millennia later. The knowledge of communal building and shared spiritual doctrine formed the operating system for the world's first true civilizations. Why did the model vanish here? Perhaps the very structure of the monument became too rigid, too demanding. The cost of labor outweighed the spiritual reward. When the people settled and farming became routine, the central need for the great nomadic gathering point faded. The energy went into building silos, not temples. The shift to farming demanded permanence. The ritual space, once the center of a nomadic life, became secondary to the grain storage and the dwelling. What was preserved was the idea of a sacred center, a reason for people to coalesce. What was forgotten was the source, the humble hunter-gatherer who dared to build a temple to the unknown. The people eventually settled. They learned to farm effectively. They found stability. But the spiritual fire that gave them civilization was literally buried beneath them. Yet, the legacy of organizing labor for a singular, grand purpose continued. It became the foundation of every subsequent empire. We have named it the beginning of the Neolithic. But what if this wasn't the beginning, but the very end of something older, grander, and more mysterious? What if the people who built Göbekli Tepe were trying to anchor an older, fading consciousness into the stone, knowing that the age of the hunter was coming to a close? What deeper knowledge compelled them to carve constellations onto the pillars? Were they mapping the heavens or predicting a fate? The monument stood silent for 11,000 years, waiting for us to develop the tools and the humility to ask the right questions. The great builders left us a single message, one that defies our modern logic, that the search for the divine is the true driving force of civilization. That the search for the divine is the true driving force of civilization. Maybe Göbekli Tepe wasn't a beginning or an end, but a transition point, the last great ritual of the hunter before he reluctantly became the farmer. We are the inheritors of their belief, still organized by institutions built on shared faith. But we have forgotten the raw, prehistoric power of that first gathering. How many chapters of humanity were lost before history decided to begin? The answers lie, still buried, in the silent earth of the Anatolian plains. If you want to explore more forgotten chapters of humanity and challenge the known timeline, subscribe to Prehuman Vault.